This talk is an attempt to make a formal generative analysis of the clausal caritive construction, which uses the same existential negative word āčin in Evenki, which is also used in the existential negation function. So this is the example of the adjectival āčin caritives: painless, without concern, and homeless. And also, if the negated item can be expressed by a verbal form, like a participle, then the standard negation can be used as in to. But I don't concentrate on the other one, but just on the special existential negation. So the except meaning is just, I only found the standard negation construction, enetauna. Okay, so this separate word for the existential negation is very common for the Altaic and Uralic languages. And as we can see in 3b and in 4, such words can be verb-like, and they can attach in different languages. They can attach verbal inflection, and in 3, in Northern Mansi, it can not attach verbal inflection, and it has to use a copula, for instance, in 3a for past. So the Evenki āčin is more like the Northern Mansi, and it doesn't have any inflection except for the inflection for number. Our sources for the analysis was the only, the analysis is based on the 21st century language, because there were some changes from since the 20th century, and we used the 2 big corpora oral stories corpus recorded in the expedition, mostly in the southern and northern Evenki regions, and also the written texts were taken from the newspaper text corpora. These are corpora of the Institute of Etymology and Anthropology of Russian Academy of Sciences. So examples from dictionaries and grammars are mostly taken for comparison. So in these examples, you see that āčin can be used in finite clause and in the adjectival and adverbial uses that are here treated as caritive uses. So we see that in the finite clause, it agrees in number with the subject, the negative existential noun. And in the attributive use, we have the example 6a, Evenki without a reindeer. And in 6b, we have the predicative use. I haven't got a wife is literally translated, I am wifeless. The adverbial use, this is a use from the newspaper text. Here, āčin is a little different. It can attach the case affix. And the negative existential noun fit doesn't have the partitive inflection. So these are problems which we're going to discuss. Vasilevich in 1940 claims that āčin is categorically underspecified. She says that it's a noun, an adjective, and a verb at the same time. But these 3 categorical features can appear in different contexts. So according to our data, the adjectival use goes with the verbal, so-called verbal use. So adjectives in Evenki in the predicative position agree with the noun, and in the attributive position, so in the predicative position, they agree with the subject. And in the attributive position, they can agree optionally with the head noun. In case, in number, and in the predicative position, they agree mostly in number. And that's it. That's why we, after Vasilevich, claimed that āčin is an adjective. And this use is characteristic for the caritive use in the adjectival context, both attributive and predicative. But differently from other Altaic and Uralic languages, āčin, the negative existential noun, can be assigned partitive case. And that's why Vasilevich claims that āčin is a verb. This will be also discussed. In the adverbial use, the oral speech construction is the same as the adjectival construction. And in the written speech, we have the possessive construction. So different constructions are used in the written and oral languages. So if the meaning of āčin is schematically illustrated in 9, the an existential NP does not exist. So there is a negation into the existential quantifier. And as for the formal analysis, let's assume that we have a small clause with the logical subject, the negative existential NP, and the predicate āčin. And the negative existential P is an accusative partitive subject of āčin. So first, let's look at the adjectival cases. Here we see that the small clauses in the brackets, like huteja asir in 10a. However, the word āčin here preserves its adjectival properties. It can agree in number, but it doesn't agree with the negative existential noun child, but with the subject. This is the predicative adjectival use of the caritive construction. So the child is singular, and the subject, they, is plural, and āčin agrees with this subject. And if we'll take the attributive use, then āčin agrees again not with the negative existential noun limit, but with the head noun land, in our lands without limit. So that means that this small clause, which I mentioned, is very small. It doesn't have any projections besides the adjectival P. So if we assume that āčin is an adjective, then its argument will be when the quantified by it negative existential noun, which is it's an unaccusative subject. And this clause doesn't contain any agreement or number phrase. It's a very small structure. However, āčin, as we saw, is not frozen. It is not a predicative particle, but it's still an adjective. It is interesting that Igor Nedalkov, in his study in of the end of the 20th century doesn't give any examples of āčin agreeing in number with the negative existential noun. So I didn't find any examples either. It seems that the negative existential noun cannot be plural at all, at least in my materials. And that might be the feature of the construction, especially as these constructions are usually translated into Russian as compound words like without a deer, it would be безальянный. It's one word, compound word, whereas Evenki doesn't have compound words at all. So it's something like something which is instead of a compound word. Okay, so the adverbial use in the 20th century, as Nedyalkov also shows, the āčin has the nominal property. It's a noun, as in 11a shows. It's an example from a newspaper. It attaches the plural affix, the case affix, dative, and also it has the possessive affix, and it behaves exactly like the head of a possessive construction in Evenki. These constructions are very popular, like very numerous in Evenki. And here we see the categorical split of āčin. And the first member of the possessive construction, Evenki, it is nominative, probably, but it's not clear how this nominative case is assigned in the formal structure, and we couldn't like cope with this problem. However, here the head of the possessive construction agrees with the negative existential noun in number, and it also has the possessive affix, agreement affix. However, it's only the written text that demonstrate this construction, whereas in oral language, we have the same construction as in the adjectival caritive use, which is illustrated in 11b. So we have the negative existential noun partitive plus the āčin, and that's all, no āčin inflection. So we see that like the unification of the two contexts, adjectival and adverbial, in the oral language, and without no unification in the written language, which is closer to the literary language. The literary language was created in the middle of the 20th century. So Vasilevich claims that partitive can also only be assigned to a negative existential noun in a caritive use in an adjectival clause. However, in the 21st century texts, we find examples like 12b, in which the subject of a negative existential finite clause has also the partitive marker. But we don't deal with such clauses, but it's interesting that there is such a widening of the partitive use in the 21st century language. So for the formal analysis, here, this is the structure. It assumes that the āčin, it is an adjective, but it's like a verbal adjective which can assign case. According to Cinque and other authors, if an adjective assigns case, it must be dominated its projection HP must be dominated by a null verb projection, which is shown in 14. And T2 is the āčin in the transcription that raises to the and incorporates into the null verbal head, whereas the T1 is the negative existential noun, that is the an accusative subject of āčin in the small clause adjective, which is the same as adjective P, and it raises to the specifier of the VP, and there it is assigned the partitive case. And this structure would work for both for the adjectival and the adverbial clauses, caritive small clauses in the oral speech. And now as I said, no number or agreement phrase is included into the small clause. And the same about the possessor or location. I assume that the possessor is not included into the small clause. It is also only included into the negative existential sentence, finite sentence. The possessor can be, however, internal, and then it would be included into the negative existential phrase. And it can be external. This is illustrated in 15. And the
5 minutes left.
No, this is finite. I mean that the caritive use doesn't have any possessor. But if the possessor in the finite negative existential is internal, it originates, it is base generated inside the negative existential phrase. Okay, how so? The last issue is the adverbial phrases in the written language, which have the nominal features of āčin. So for comparison, we have the oral language example in 17, in which is exactly similar to the adjectival phrase. And here we have the structure for the possessive phrase. This is the adverbial caritive use in the written language, which is the literary language, and that's why it's more old-fashioned, maybe old-fashioned. So here the āčin agrees with the noun phrase, negative existential noun phrase, as I said, and it can attach the case affix, but it doesn't, it's not clear how it assigns nominative to the negative existential phrase, noun. So in the possessive construction in Evenki, the first member, which is not the head, is also has never any case inflection, and it can be assumed that it is like a default nominative, but we don't have, there are no cases in which a noun like the nominal āčin in 18 would assign nominative. There are no cases, other cases where you can prove that, which would help to prove that the nominal āčin can assign nominative to to the other member of the possessive phrase. So it's still a problem. So that's it. And now the conclusions. Caritive constructions in oral Evenki consist of āčin, that is an adjective, and its theme, negative existential phrase, they form the small clause, and this clause doesn't have any agreement projection and no position for in external possessor or location. The adjective status of āčin in its caritive use can be proved. It doesn't agree with the existential noun phrase, but it can agree with the sentence subject or with the head noun. The negative existential phrase is assigned the lexical particle case by āčin plus a null verb. Since the adjectives cannot assign case by themselves. And in adverbial caritives, only in written text, unlike the 20th century Evenki, āčin is a nominal, it forms a nominal possessive construction with NP, with the negative existential P being its head. And āčin has numeral case possessive markers. It agrees with the existential NP in number, but like with the possessive affix, but it doesn't assign case to it. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you very much. It's time for questions. Maxim wrote some time ago that he has a small question, and please, those others who have questions, write it down.
Yes, thank you so much. I had a small question about example 6. So, yes, I wanted to ask, is the attributive interpretation the only one possible here? Because judging by the translation, it could also be an adverbial use, like a conditional use. Without a reindeer, an Evenki wouldn't be able to live before. How do we know it is attributive here? Are there any formal?
You are right that the adverbial interpretation is also possible here, but my data is the text and sentences in the text, and in the context of from which I took this sentence, it was only the adjectival interpretation, like the an Evenki without a reindeer. Well, it is hard for him to leave something like that. So I think that it's in the example, in the text which I used in the sentence in this text, it is interpreted as an adjectival caritive, and it is translated also in the corpus, it is translated as bezalienny. So that's why I thought, because it's like, it's not it's a state, it is a like model like context, he is not able to live, but it's not a like dynamic situation that an Evenki without a reindeer came to ask for money, something like that. That's why I thought it's an adjectival, but in principle it can also be adverbial. In general, adjectival constructions and both adverbial constructions are both not very often used in the oral texts, and that's why my examples are probably they are mostly used in the predicative position, as in 6b. So these are more clear, but we have the attributive uses too, and probably since they are very rare, they tend to like become all like of the same pattern, and like the more like, I don't know, that's the data I have.
Yeah, and are the attributive ones always in preposition to the head noun?
Yes, the postpositional adjectives really, they exist. I mean, they can be found in the text, but then it is a calque from calque from Russian, or it is something like an emphatic inversion in which the adjective is, or the adjectival group is emphasized, or something like that. So since these adjectival phrases are very really quite rare, and they are, I don't have enough data to, like, I didn't find any inverted constructions.
I see. Thank you.
Well, Natalia Aralova has 3 questions. Let's see if we have time for all of them.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, thank you for the talk. It's very interesting, and I do think the most interesting part is this verbal form, verbal adjectival, āčin, for which you were searching like an explanation. Why is the subject in plural, in nominative, and how is it working? I was wondering how many of these constructions, verbal forms like āčin in a subordinate form with the case marking and possessive marking, do you have in your corpus in general? Is it possible to have that sort of form in singular? How will it look like? āčin dun? Is it possible?
Well, I think it is possible if the negative existential noun is
In singular.
singular, but I cannot prove it because,
did you do any elicitation around it? Did you check that form in general?
No, I didn't do elicitation. I'd only looked up in the corpora, and that's only the examples. Well, here in 7, the āčin is singular, and the negative existential noun imuk is singular. So plural is not like.
But this is with instrumental, and it's not with the possessive marking. So that is āčin, it really looks almost like a participial verbal.
No. It's a very straight division, like strict and clear division between these cases like 7 and the ones like 6, because in the 7, in the cases like 7, we have a possessive construction, even if it doesn't have a possessive affix. Evenki has a lot of types of possessive construction with the regard of agreement. For example, if āčin didn't have case marking, it would also be a possessive construction. Like, it is essential that the first noun imuk is nominative, and it immediately precedes the head of the possessive construction. And in principle, the imuk the first member of the possessive construction, it can also have number, case, and possessive markers agreeing with this head of the possessive construction. So, but it's not partitive, definitely. So this is clearly a possessive construction, 2 nouns in a row, and agreeing with each other, like. And the predicative one is very different. Here, no agreement. There is no agreement, as I said, in 6a, for instance. āčin can agree in number, but it would agree in 10. In 10, it would agree In 10a, it agrees with the subject of this sentence, nun ratin.
Yes, yes.
But it doesn't agree with
this
the
example.
negative existential noun child.
Yeah.
That's why I think it's an like a reduced small clause, which is something like a syntactic construction, which is an analog to a compound word. And as I cite Igor Neidalkov, Evenki doesn't have any compound words. So these two cases are very different, and that's it. It's very hard to believe that you can create a unitary formal like model that would account for both of them.
May I ask another question, or are we out of time?
Yes, very fast. Yes.
Okay, I think it was example 5 with the lawyers, where you had the focus particle ka on the lacking argument. And I was just wondering how frequent, if it's always ka, or if you also can have a particle da in such.
Yeah, I didn't. I mean, I think yes, because they are usually interchangeable. Like if you can have da, then you can have ka, and so on.
Okay.
But I don't remember like all the examples, so maybe some of them have da. I don't know. But it is not a caritive use. It's a finite clause in which the lawyer is the subject.
Yes. I got it. My last question was just if there is any dialectal variability between East and West and North in this respect.
I didn't find any because the caritive constructions are generally rarely found, and the worst thing is that the younger speakers, or the ones most speakers like have like 20 times ago they have switched to Russian, and they have forgotten Evenki to a very great deal, like to a very great extent. So they wouldn't use this construction at all. It's like I can find them like with more old speakers, or like, I don't know, they people use it, but very rarely. I think they, or more the data is needed and so on.
Thank you.